Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Preimesberger, editor of eWEEK. Thanks for joining us today on this next segment of eWEEK eSpeaks. It's our series of interviews with IT leaders from all different parts of the IT world. And today's interviewee is Dave Cole, and Dave is the CEO of Open Raven, a very interesting sounding company name. And Dave, welcome today to eWEEK eSpeaks.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Thanks for having me.
And David, tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and Open Raven. Where'd you get that name?
Myself, I'm a 25-year security veteran, just like my co-founder, Mark Curfey. Mark is the original founder of OWASP way back in the day when he was a practitioner at Charles Schwab. Mark has a long career in AppSec. I most recently held positions at Tenable, where I was their chief product officer. And prior to that, I was first chief product officer of CrowdStrike, where I helped them through their Series C. So I've been building products for over 20 years. And Open Raven came about when Mark and I had always wanted to work together. We met each other way back in the days of Internet Security Systems, if you can remember them. Great Atlanta-based company where Mark and I were both consultants. And the name of Open Raven, one comes from, let's split it apart. One is open is about an ethos of transparency. And that's both how we run the company. It's also the open core design of the product. We'll be announcing a lot more on that next year. And also it's the fact that, today you can go up and you can start a trial on Open Raven and you don't have to do a demo. You don't have to have the sales team hold your hand. You can do that. Raven was really about being able, first off, they're the most intelligent of birds. They're very close to it. And they're very good at giving, of course, getting above and giving the canonical kind of bird's eye view, but they're very good at finding things. And we looked at it and said, in the world of data protection, what do you need? You need to be able to see everything. So there isn't anything outside of our purview, but you also need to be able to find very specific things, whether it's a developer secret, whether it's regulated data, whether it's personal sensitive data or anything else. So that's the quick explanation.
Yeah. And we did a story, of course, on the launch in eWEEK recently, and I was reviewing that story just a few minutes ago before we came on, and this has to do with the whole scheme of Open Raven has to do with the accumulation of so much data in all the data stores that we have, whether it's in devices or in the cloud, in servers. There's so much of it that it's just not controllable. So you are controlling it in your own special way. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and the numbers meeting, that's a pretty good indicator of the amount of data that's out there. It's absolutely massive. And data used to be jealously guarded by the DBAs. Now it's being handled by data scientists, product people, salespeople, marketing. It's being driven by data science and business analytics, business intelligence. And it's simply going to continue to accumulate at massive scale. And the movement of that data to the cloud means, much like the rest of the cloud, it's much more dynamic. It is much more easy to duplicate. So we run into all sorts of lineage problems, provenance issues, everything else. And on top of that, you have a regulatory environment that really blurs privacy and security. So we talk about data protection. It's the union of privacy and security. And as a result, what do you see? You see GDPR actions against high-profile companies, such as British Airways, Marriott, Google. And you see breaches that are really the result, much more so, of human error and whoopsies than they are by, the FireEye news that just came out yesterday, which was a focus adversary. So, matter of fact, Gartner has a quote that says by 2025, 99% of cloud security issues are simply going to be human error, 99%. So the problem we're trying to solve is, first, understand what you have. We simply lost a grip on what data is out there. And secondly, make it easy to avoid a data exposure incident, a privacy incident, a regulatory issue, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the human element has always been the wild card in all of IT, especially when it comes to security. And any way that a company can put the safeguard, the backup, the control, and the balance checks on the human element, that's it. But 99%, I hadn't heard that percentage. That's pretty impressive and surprising, actually, to me. Yeah.
It's a very strong statement. We just did a presentation yesterday on Bright Talk where Mark and I went through the issues with cloud, how we believe that cloud is fundamentally more secure than on-prem, but it requires a new mindset, new approach, and new tools. And one of the things is you have things like S3 buckets that really are, secure by design, but the problem is when you use them in the wild and you use them with folks who oftentimes haven't been trained, maybe don't have time for training. And when you have an environment where so many people are touching them and anyone can put content in there, the collision of safe by design with real world usage, it doesn't survive it. So as a result, it's just simply too easy to make mistakes. And then take that, Chris, and multiply it by how many clouds are you using and how quickly those are changing. It's incredibly hard to get it right. And the most natural thing to do is to make mistakes. And those mistakes oftentimes are incredibly public and incredibly painful.
Right. Can you give us a little insight into how OpenRaven works? Obviously, there's some intelligence involved in this. Is it your own AI engine that you guys have built for this specifically, or what?
Yeah, we use AI, we use machine learning, but I think equally important for us is knowing when not to use machine learning. So we use machine learning in a couple ways, and we built it ourselves. But honestly, there's other aspects of the platform that we're a little more proud of, and where we've had to put a lot more time and energy into it. So one of those is doing security in a cloud native way. Far many security products rely upon using an agent, which feels very on-prem-y and very old school. Using a network scanner also feels painful and hard to architect. Or using a sidecar, which you have to involve your developers, maybe change the way you code sometimes. And all of those things, feel painful to the customer, and it creates friction between the SecOps team and the cloud team, the cloud infrastructure team at times. What we've done from an architecture perspective is we use a serverless model whereby you can quickly get a view across the entire environment of what data is there. And this is one of the big problems that we heard from people, from our CISO friends and other security leaders is, if we're to be honest, we don't know where our data is inside our environment. And we looked at it and said, far too many products are kicking the can on this essential step of just wrapping your arms around the new perimeter, if you will, which is all the data that's out there. So we use serverless functions to locate all the data. And we use the same model then to inventory and classify the data that's there. And we allow you to wrap a policy around that. And all of this entire platform is what we built. We use machine learning, to your question, for some aspects of data store fingerprinting. So we know whether we're dealing with MongoDB or CouchDB or CockroachDB, you name it. And then on top of that, we also use machine learning as part of data classification. It's arguably not the most important thing we use there, though. We found things like data adjacency is really effective at determining what type of data is there, and things like calling out to APIs. Like, let's say it's a payment card data, we think it's payment card data. You can do a LUN check, which allows you to verify that it's actual payment card. So the combination of techniques and just being kind of fiercely pragmatic about all those things together and putting ourselves in the shoes of, both not just the security team, but also the DevOps team, the people who are responsible for cloud infrastructure is really part of where we put our emphasis. And, there's just, so it's such a great time to build products. There's things simply available now that weren't available to my co-founder, Mark, when he built SourceClear a few years back, and when I was building the platform at CrowdStrike and Tenable.
Yeah, that's impressive that I was going to mention earlier that you helped build the CrowdStrike platform. CrowdStrike is one of the hottest security companies around right now, for sure. Let's look ahead, Dave, at 2021 and beyond, maybe just the next 12 to 24 months. What trends do you see in IT security, data security? I think that you guys seem to be even starting your own trend. I don't know, maybe I'm reaching out too far, but that's what it looks like to me. What do you see? What do you see for enterprises going forward that they need to really be aware of, and in order to keep track of all their data?
Yeah, we think of security kind of in phases, or being a Los Angelino, I think it in terms of waves, right? And the endpoint wave, is pretty much, feels like it's kind of crashed onto the beach at this point. And there's been a ton of good work done, not just by CrowdStrike, but by others as well. But we're increasingly in a good place there. When we started really this in earnest in 2012, it was painful. We're in a good place with that now. I think the wave that's kind of cresting and that COVID has pushed on really hard is the identity wave. We're kind of at the apex, I think, of some really great work that needed to be done by identity. And I think Okta is kind of emerged as the clear leader there. But having said that, we look at this and say, what's if you look at the shared responsibility model of the cloud, whether it's SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, there's two things that are left at the end of it that you always own. One is identity, where there's really essential work that's going on right now with Zero Trust, what we call Beyond Corp and related. But after that, there's data. You're responsible for the data in every instance. And we think that the big next emphasis, and not just because of regulatory drivers either, which I think almost get too much of the attention, but there's a core visibility and infrastructure problem with data where people simply don't know what they don't know, that we think is going to be a huge emphasis going forward. And it's going to be not just regulated data, but sensitive data, children's data, where there are new privacy laws, and things like CIPRA, which was just passed in California, are going to drive a lot more attention around as they mandate things like consideration of controls for things in the data science pipeline and mandatory assessments and so on. But, we think that kind of lack of visibility kind of harkens back candidly to the early days of endpoint, when people said, my AV doesn't show me the APTs. It doesn't show me the human attacks. I feel exposed. I feel naked. Dig in there and give it to me. And so often in security, whether it was the old days with vulnerability scanners where people couldn't see their vulns, or intrusion detection systems where your only network visibility was what you got from Wireshark or Etherreal, we're seeing that with data now too. And once you see it, it's, it sort of scratches that itch in the middle of your back. It's like, oh, thank God I can see it now. Now let's operationalize this and make sure that it stays protected and not rely upon that manual effort. So we think that data is going to be a big part of next year. Identity is going to continue. The implications of 5G for Internet of Things is going to be meaningful for folks. I think there's going to be some really clever applications of blockchain to solving distributed trust models in healthcare, as we have to share information about who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. We continue to march along with replacement of AES as, a post-quantum look in search of a post-quantum encryption standard, which is likely to be lattice-based. There's all sorts of just fascinating things that are happening. And, underneath all of that is all of us coming to grips with our transition to the cloud and the world of multi-cloud, which no one chooses, but ends up being inevitable in the messy world we live in.
Yeah, well, a lot of threads hanging off of those statements, Dave. Thank you for that. And a lot of things to think about for an enterprise when it's looking at its security at all the levels that it needs to look at. And the automated solution, or at least partially automated solution, is what we really need. We need help. We can't do this manually.
100%. I mean, we have a long-standing 30% deficit in the number of security professionals and the number of positions that are open and that are needed. That's going back, almost a decade now. And, you can't outsource all of it, although there's a resurgence in managed security service providers, particularly for things like running your SOC. At the end of the day, the answer isn't always outsourcing. It's going to be a combination of automation. It's going to be a combination of designing products better so that they're usable by people who aren't experts, so the whole industry is more approachable to new folks who don't have to ramp on a whole bunch of tech details.
Right.
We're only going to solve it by a combination of things. And with, the budget pressure that COVID's created, isn't going to go away anytime soon. I'm hearing for the first time security teams are having their real budget pressure next year because of, the business climate and so forth. So, automation is incredibly important alongside, designing products better alongside managed services and everything else.
Yeah, it looks like next year is going to be very, very interesting in IT all the way around, especially in security. So, David Cole, CEO and co-founder of OpenRaven, thank you very much for joining us on eSpeaks today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, I think this begs a follow-up at some point, because I think there's a lot of things that you mentioned I'd like to come back and revisit. So we'll do that, I hope.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right. Listen, Dave, thank you very much. And for everybody following along to the end here, thank you very much for joining us on eSpeaks, and have a great rest of your eWeek. Thanks for joining us on eWEEK eSpeaks. Go to eWEEK.com to hear more conversations with IT thought leaders.